Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining us for our May webinars with the CI Fellows. And today we're going to be exploring the current status of the competitive technical intelligence in the United States. And a little bit about the CI Fellows. So I'm Cynthia Chang Correa. I'm the president of the CI Fellows, which is an educational nonprofit organization. And we center our mission around our roles as ambassadors, champions, mentors, and educators for ethical CI practices. And today we're delighted that to have our esteemed panelists. We have Dr. Tom Tao, professor of James Madison University. And as you can see from his bio, Dr. Tom Tao teaches competitive intelligence there, as well as being a well-published author. He serves on the editorial board of Competitive Intelligence in Shanghai from 2015 to 2019, and he is a CI fellow, and we're delighted to have him. And next we have excuse me, Dr. Brad Ashton. And Dr. Brad Ashton is Principal Advisor for Technology at Concurrent Technology, Principal Advisor for Technology, sorry, at Concurrent Technologies Corporation. For over 2 decades, he's provided assistance to businesses and governments, and he's also a well-published author with over 40 professional publications and presentations, and having edited 2 leading books on technology intelligence, which we will discuss a bit today as well. So welcome, Dr. Ashton. And we also have rejoining us Dr. Craig S. Fleisher. He's the VP of Competitive Intelligence Fellows, and on the practitioner side, he's also the Chief Learning Officer at Aurora WDC. And Dr. Fleisher is a widely published and one of the globe's most highly cited authors of 14 books, including many that you know, Business and Competitive Analysis, and Analysis Without Paralysis, and Strategic and Competitive Analysis, all of which I've used in my own classroom as well. So all of our esteemed panelists are CI Fellows and who've served in various leadership roles as well in the CI community. So welcome all. And whoops, sorry about that. And I'm going to, oops, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on here. I've actually got a deck here that is, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what happened, but I have a deck that is not displaying things properly. So excuse me for a sec. Terribly sorry for this technical problem. All right. Yeah, I'm awfully sorry here. I seem to be getting some errors as well. If Craig or others want to put their copy on, we can see if we can get that going.
Let's see.
I'm terribly sorry for this this technical glitch. Yeah, sorry. It just seems like we're getting some very strange errors on my system right now.
How do we
okay, while you're doing that,
yeah, I'm sorry, I got it back. Okay, I just got it. Yeah, so sorry about this, guys.
No worries. That's why we're doing competitive technology intelligence today.
Yeah, ironically, because we've never had problems with this before. With our, okay, here we are. Excuse me here. All right. Okay, now I just need to get this thing broadcast back with you all. Okay. All right, so I'll just share. Okay. Now, so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Fleischer, who will tell us a bit more about the background, as well as launch into our poll, just to gauge where you are all at. So,
real good. You know, we had started the study that we're going to be talking to everybody about today, probably about almost a year ago now, and it resulted out of some conversations that Dr. Tao and Dr. Ashton and others and I have had about, what's been going on with CTI. For those of you who followed any of our work when we were doing some of it associated with the SCIP and other kinds of communities out there, you may realize that we haven't really done a national or an internationally focused study on CTI, and it's now nearing 20 years actually. The last that we have documentation of was one done in 1999. There were some meetings, believe it or not, that SCIP organized shortly thereafter. We actually held a couple of CTI focused meetings back in that same kind of turn of the millennium period. But we're going to start out today because one of the questions that we were trying to determine was, where is CTI at and who's doing it and what are they doing? So why don't we ask the audience just to chime in with the poll. So if you wouldn't mind, you've got 5 options here. For those of you who are on with us, and I can see we've got about 3 dozen on as we speak, and I know there's going to be some more coming in shortly. Please go ahead and respond with one of the 5 that best represents your interactions and associations with CTI. Hey, and Tom and Brad, while people are responding to that, what's your guess as to what the highest frequency answer is going to be on this one?
Tom, you go ahead. Comment, Tom, and I'll follow you.
Well, I think probably number 4. Most people will say I'm in a CI role, and I do a little bit of CTI. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that's very close. I'd give a little bit more weight also to C, the third answer, but I think in general, 4 is probably going to dominate.
Yeah, that's my guess as well, guys. And we're going to see just how lousy prognosticators we really are here in a moment, aren't we? Cynthia, what's the verdict?
All right, so here we go. We're going to wrap this up. We've got 70% of people voting, and the results.
Yeah, well, hey, you guys you're not lousy prognosticators. So yeah, so almost half of our respondents, again, they do CTI obviously as part of their larger CI roles, but it probably isn't one of their primary or even secondary activities. And I'm not surprised that is the result. I'm a little surprised though. We do have of the 21 people that responded, 3 of them do have CTI as their primary role.
That's awesome.
4 of them, they don't do CTI. So about an even number, at least proportionally. So that's I wasn't expecting that, to be honest with you, but that was certainly interesting nevertheless. All right, well, thanks
Very interesting
for voting. We may return to that in a little bit. So let's go back to the slides if we can, and I'll just kind of tee up our study, and we're going to discuss the results with you. So as I was mentioning before our poll today, we realized that at the Council of CI Fellows that this is an area of intelligence activity that really hasn't been given a lot, and I'm probably overstating that, hasn't been given much attention at all in recent years. And several of us have long-standing interest, if not work roles within this field. So we realized that it was probably past time to do another study of that. And we determined that this year we would involve a university. And this is where Dr. Tao comes into play very quickly. As you already heard in his introduction, Dr. Tao does lead a CI program of studies at James Madison University. And there he has a number of very bright and ambitious intelligent students that are looking to get out and join many of us out in the field doing this kind of work. So we actually brought a proposal to him to engage his students in a project that was to delve a little bit more deeply into the field of CTI, to kind of get a sense of where it was, to see where it may be going, and to see if some of our theories kind of going in were actually validated by the survey and the research that they did. And essentially, it was really a 2-pronged survey process. The survey itself was shared. We let people know about this one via social media mostly. Some of you who are on the call today, I can see your names there. I know some of you actually participated in it, so we thank you for that. But it was a two-part process where the survey was one of that, and we had, I think it was close to 20 people that actually responded to the comprehensive survey itself. And then there was a fair number of expert depth interviews that were done with a variety of different people. Again, I do see one or two of those people that the students reached out to are here on the call with us as well today. So again, two different processes. They also did a secondary research round, essentially looking at three different ways of trying to dissect what was happening. And I should state right up front, and it was a choice we made early on that maybe in retrospect we kind of wished we hadn't. We really were trying, at least initially, because we really didn't have a recent benchmark to understand what was happening in the U.S., fully recognizing that CTI is done globally. And we'll speak more about that here in a moment, but just to keep it manageable, and because it was the first time we had done this with a student group in well over 20 years, the scope was set to look at the status of CTI in the U.S., which is the actual title of our webinar today. So on that note, let's we're going to go in and just talk a little bit about who did this. We had 4 student researchers. These are all intelligence analysis students that are in JMU's intelligence analysis program. All of these, and Dr. Tao, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they're all seniors in your program. Is that right, or were?
Yes, they have to conduct this capstone project for the last year. They're all senior students, and they graduated in May this year. Absolutely.
So these are great students, and this is the cherry on the top of their study process. The students were really excited to get into this. A couple of the students were also either are or were doing internships and other forms of interaction with companies that looked at CTI. So some of them had a natural inclination to want to do this, and more than one of them, as we would later find out also, in doing the project, maybe developed greater career interest in the field of CTI. So it was sponsored by the Council of CI Fellows, and I also kind of took the lead as the kind of supervising researcher on this, and we found some interesting things. So we're going to go now into the kind of main judgments that we found, and I'm going to have Drs. Ashton and Tao kind of talk to us. I'll just briefly introduce this. What the students did find, they didn't find a lot of maturity in the field. They thought that the respondents indicated that it was relatively young. In other words, maybe it was even, I don't want to quite go embryonic. I think that's an overstatement, but it actually hadn't been around as long as maybe they or even we had expected them to find it. But what was nice about it, there was an extensive industry base, and we're going to spend a few more minutes here in the following slides kind of really honing in on the industries that CTI has tended to embed itself in and has really maybe progressed the fastest in. They looked at the geographic distribution around the country, and again, the one thing they noted right off the bat, and we're going to spend a few minutes talking about this, the majority of their respondents were somehow clustered in and around the Washington, D.C. area, which may not have come as a shock to either Drs. Tao or Ashton, who are also, oh, by the way, both based in and around the Washington, D.C. area. Having said that, I can assure everybody that again, the sampling and the strategies we use to try to identify people to participate actually, again, were definitely nationally focused on the U.S., but that's what they found. The third thing was that the potential for growth and innovation over the next decade, they really saw the field as being able to contribute, and a lot of what they heard in the depth interviews in particular suggested that there is great opportunity for CTI professionals and for CTI functions to make a bigger difference within the businesses within which it serves. And that was an interesting finding that, again, we will spend a few more minutes here shortly discussing at great depth. Last but not least, they no doubt identified some vulnerabilities. They didn't find any kind of predominant structural or designs or architectures associated with how CTI was organized, but they did see and they did sense from the interviews and also the survey that it was going to grow, and that more industries would find CTI capabilities as being important in in the years ahead. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to throw this back to Brad and Dr. Tao. What do you guys think? Was that what you were expecting to see? Those major judgments, was that counterintuitive? Was it in line with your prior hypotheses? What's your insights on that?
Tom, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I don't think we find a great surprise that's really contradictory to what our original perception is. And the final result, I think, is quite somewhat intuitive and logical. And for example, the geographic distribution of CTI practitioners. And if you look at all those dots here, it really represents the amount of people that's in those areas. And by the way, when we are studying this phenomena, we not only used the survey, which we had about 27% of response rate, but with a small sample size. So we need to know the limitation of the research itself. It's really a starting point of a further research in CTI. So the students went through a extensive interview process with 8 experts in the field. So they get to know a little bit background from that approach. And when we get to try to figure out the geographic location of people, we actually used LinkedIn to search for people who does CTI, who mentions CTI in their LinkedIn profile. And so we identified about 110 people in the entire USA that has a clear sort of writing on their LinkedIn profiles as I'm doing CTI. And this is how we map things up. And at the end, we know they are distributed in all those different sort of technology hot areas like Silicon Valley, like Boston, like Denver, like Texas, Austin. But by and large, the biggest concentration is in DC area, where you have the federal agencies, and also you have a high concentration of private sectors with high tech. So that's what we are getting. And in terms of industry distribution, it really covers not only the private sector, where we listed all these firms, but also covers the government agencies, academia, and it really shows that CTI is being researched, studied, and practiced in all these different sectors. And we did not get to sort of a survey and study the international distribution, but as we mentioned earlier, that probably is a bigger population out there. For example, in East Asia or in Europe, that's where you will see a lot of research in CTI. So that's definitely one future area that we want to expand to and want to research on. Brett, you want to add something to this?
Just a little bit. I'm on the previous geographical distribution. It's interesting that we got a few of the high technology centers in the U.S. I actually expected a little bit more from the Silicon Valley community. Certainly, the ones that we found in Texas and in the Northeast and the DC area makes sense. And then there are a few other spots where there's obviously some technology work going on in Florida and in the Midwest. So it was an interesting distribution, but I thought we'd get more from Silicon Valley.
One of the, I think the limitation of the study is we probably limit the definition of CTI too narrow. And I bet if we really include, let's say, technology scouting, if that's the case, we'll see a much bigger population in San Francisco area and also in Boston area. Yeah, and that's where I think the VC community is very large. Not only the sort of the professional VC and also the corporate VC. That they have a lot of people doing technology scouting. Yeah. And really, if you look at the detailed distribution, task that they perform, it's really CTI related, or at least CTI based.
Dr. Tao, let me have you kind of add to that, and Dr. Ashton as well. So if you were to share with people what you think generally constitutes the set of CTI activities that are being done that maybe we didn't capture as easily as we had anticipated going in this research, what kinds of things would that include? So, you just mentioned, technology scouting, something that's often done out in the valley with the DCs and others. What other things, what other activities do you see as being part of, if there were a common CTI mix of activities, what would that be constituted with?
Well,
yeah, I could. Go ahead,
Tom. Sorry. For me, the big word would be open innovation. And that's where you will have a much broader sort of area of people that conducts research on technology, on IP, on technology forecasting. And so that's where people starting to pay attention to external environment, looking for opportunities and threats from the technology arena. So that's where I think if we want to research this phenomena further and in the future, we want to cover open innovation as a big area. Brett?
I completely agree with that. There's a great deal of work going on in scouting. There's much more literature on scouting than there is on CTI and technology intelligence by itself. There's an enormous number of examples of companies that have used scouting successfully to acquire and bring in new technology. And that's actually a component of the broader strategy of open innovation, which is to get outside your own internal company laboratories and product development groups and find out what's going on outside, both in terms of strengthening your current market position and also looking for new growth opportunities that you really don't have to invest as much in because other people have already done the work or are doing the work. And that's a good way to set up partnerships and collaborations with firms that can strengthen your position and your objectives. So I totally agree. Those two are very, very important elements. You'll also see from time to time references to, in my experience, use of patent information, which is a critical, important element of technology intelligence. It's not used as much as I think it should, but there are people that do what I would call technology landscaping, which is to go out and survey the general broad areas of technology that are of interest. And so technology landscaping and mapping is another element of technology intelligence that I actually think that'll grow as time goes on. There's some of it going on now, and it's potentially a very useful and valuable aspect of this work.
So let's take that a step further. I mean, obviously, kind of historically, CTI was always in, big, large, industries like, and I'll use a great example, aerospace and defense or pharmaceuticals, industries that have, multi and literally billion-dollar kind of revenue potential and, often have both public and private side activities. Are there any industries then that you can see that might benefit even more from CTI that for whatever reason haven't shown up in our literature and maybe didn't even show up in our research, that that you would expect to see things like technology scouting and patent landscaping become more prominent in the coming years, or even maybe presently?
Well, in the world of startups, especially high-tech startups, that's where I think they need this capability badly. If you have some initial idea, if you have some initial IP or patent, you want to see the technology landscape. You want to know where you are in the entire world in terms of researching this particular technology or branch of technology. And so that you don't reinvent the wheel, and you also need to know who are your competitors, where they are, what they're doing, at what stage of development of the technology they are in, who's getting what funding, who's funding these. All these critical information are very, very important for the small startup to understand we are on the right track. We're not wasting our time and money. And what we are doing is really cutting edge, and we are on a great path. And that will also help them to convince further or future investors that we have done our homework, and we know where we are, and here are the evidence to support that. And this will be critical for them to find new investors and possibly new partners in the industry.
One quick point I can add, Craig, is that there's an interesting dichotomy to me going on here between large companies that have well-funded research and development programs who are often looking outside to find the small startups as a way to get new ideas and new thinking in their programs. And then on the flip side, there's the small companies who don't have a big R&D budget, who are looking around at companies, including big companies, to see what they can find and exploit for their own purposes.
Absolutely. So let's take that a step further. If you're one of those small companies, you're again, an entrepreneur with an idea, or maybe you're an engineer in the garage or whatever else, again, the memes would tell us about these folks. Yeah, obviously they don't have the money or the time or maybe access to the database. If you're one of those, small emerging growth-oriented technologists, where could you go to get, or are there cheap places or resources that you could utilize to help you do a little bit of, I'm going to use the word kind of amateur CTI work? I mean, obviously you can't afford a staff to do that for you. Where do you go? What do you do? What do you look at? What would you guys recommend to those folks?
Tom, you want to go ahead first? Comment?
No, you can start.
Okay. There are a couple things to do. I mean, as most of you know, there's an enormous amount of online information out there that you can exploit. The problem is how to filter it and get what you want that's useful. And I talk now about all online sources, including social media, including databases, including literature. There's an enormous amount of material out there. You just have to be very clever about how you search and capture and filter what you want and what you need. There are very good tools out there to help you do that, some of which are expensive, some of which are not. It's not sufficient to just go out and do a Google search. You can get some general information, but there are very powerful specialized search tools that get you into databases that you normally wouldn't get into. So that's one possibility. Tom and I both favor what we call human intelligence. One of the best things to do is go to technical conferences or technical meetings and talk to people in fields that are similar to yours or fields that you want to learn more about. That's a classic element of my experience, is talking to people. Scientists and engineers like to talk about what they do. And so you can often get really rich information in those kind of environments. So those are a couple things I'd start off with.
And I'll just add here, we've got our chat is starting to fire up. And so fellow Elise Knuckles suggests industry conferences, and Richard Caldwell, a well-known CTI practitioner, says trade associations.
Yes.
And I love that Yvonne Davis says, hire me.
Very good.
We have
a lot of people,
right here.
A lot of people out there we could hire, right?
Exactly. We've got also posting too. We actively help companies in this space and various types of programs and teaching companies about CI. So it seems like there's a lot of instruction and learning out there as well. So
yes,
that's actually a very good point, because there are a number of very knowledgeable consultants in this business, and you can often hire somebody for a reasonable amount of money and get a lot of value for your investment without having to spend a lot of time searching or buying software to do it properly, or if you're not really interested into patent analysis, which requires some skills. It's possible to hire somebody to do that for you, and that point's well taken.
And bootstrapping it with universities, by the way, many universities, again, Dr. Tao's program.
That's right.
They've got students looking for this kind of work. They're looking to do it. They've got access to the newest, patent landscape technologies and other things. And, they're chomping at the bit to get to work to help folks do that. So, don't miss those either. And I think John Dunnett mentioned as well, out in Atlantic, Canada, he's got a group through the ACOA, the Atlantic Canadian Opportunities Administration, that is busy hosting a bunch of workshops and webinars and provides resources to the companies and frankly, entrepreneurs out in that part of the world. And we see those similar kinds of efforts, by the way, not just in the US and Canada, obviously, but they're far and wide, everywhere from Russia to Korea to China. Certainly all over Europe, in particular in the Nordic countries, we've seen institutionalized efforts to really support the growth of technology-oriented ventures and enterprises, as well as those individuals that are actually seeking to lead those out. So there's no shortage of those. Dr. Ashton, you had mentioned the tools, and actually our next slide does talk about what some of those tools are. And I just want to kind of briefly just look at this and chat about them. So we, on the list, we see a lot of things around human that doesn't surprise any of us on the call. But I will note for the record, in this day and age of strong technology, human often gets pushed to the back burner, if I can use that kind of terminology. Right. And I think for those of us that have been in and around the CTI field as long as we have, human actually probably continues to serve the primary role in most CTI analytical efforts. I don't think that's changed dramatically, although needless to say, those human beings doing it, are supported through technology and with technology in ways that we weren't even 5 and 10 years ago. The secondary sources, again, Dr. Tao, I heard you mention social media being a great new source, patent analysis, link analysis, network analysis, which today, especially in using social and some of the, kind of ubiquitous mobile media that we have that tracks every move and every step we make, literally with a geolocational link. Technical interviews, needless to say, that continues to remain important. Technology lifecycle analysis and forecasting. As you guys look at these lists, are you seeing what the students found? Is that pretty aligned with your sense of what the key tools that are needed to be successful in CTI are?
I'll go ahead first, Tom. In my experience, this is certainly a good list to begin with. There are other tools and techniques that can be used that are popular when you get into the weeds, so to speak, and do some analysis. I'm thinking, for instance, in some of my own experience, the whole area of data mining and processing data in a sense that you think of in what's called bibliometrics and citation analysis. You look at references and citation, which helps you establish links and chains through the database and through the companies and players who are involved in it. And so that's an important one, I think. The other thing that's interesting is in the human area, in the interaction and the technical interviews, I've used what's called the Delphi technique a number of times, where you get inputs from a group of scientists and engineers who all benefit from a discussion, but you can all pull together interactions that are stimulated by an ongoing sharing of information. The other point to make is a lot of the traditional intelligence techniques that we use in CI are really apply here as well. So we shouldn't discount that.
Well, this is Cynthia looking at the chats here, and Lisa has a bit of an insider's tip about women's advantage in CTI. So I just want to give a nod to that. And Jonathan done it as well. Suggests Google Scholar. So when we're talking about citation analysis, Brad, to your point, Jonathan got some thoughts there too. And John Jackson, he asks, he says, I do wonder with respect to the survey, how many might not have been counted as they weren't aware of what CTI is? Nearly all I do is CTI, but I never use the term to describe it. Might be a common theme for those at science-based companies. So thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, yeah, I think that's a very good point. Go ahead, Tom.
That's the issue with CTI at this moment, or probably for the last 20 years, that we sort of limit ourselves to this very specific terminology. We need to really.
Excuse me, Tom. I'm sorry. Can you adjust your? Yes, please.
Okay. I think the term CTI is really limiting to us, and we need to open it up, and that's going to give us the access to a much broader audience, much broader community of practitioners. And I think CTI should be sought as a set of technologies or to back things up. But I think open innovation probably is the better word to really cover what most people do, and that will give us a much broader field to
I agree. One final comment on tools. We mentioned social media, which is an enormous information resource which you can get lost in very easily. There are now tools out there that are beginning to become helpful in that. One called chatter analysis, for example, that allows you to systematically look at social media inputs from a number of different sources. That's a growing area.
And I would add to that on the analysis side, we're getting new methods and techniques. One kind of comes immediately to my mind is Wardley mapping. For those of you that want to do network analysis of a variety of different processes, that particular method is growing in applications literally by the day. So no doubt we're going to continue to see those. So with all of these kinds of tools out there, with all the resources, is there a future for people to actually practice whatever we're calling this, whether we call it open innovation or CTI? So the next slide we have, this question about career paths. Brad, you've been in CTI, for the vast, what we call CTI for the vast majority of your career. Is there a future for people to specialize in whatever we're calling this? And if so, what is it that they need to know? What is it, what competencies, what knowledge, skills, abilities, and experiences should they have in order to be successful at it?
Well, this is a good set of basic information in terms of career paths right here. What's interesting to me is that you certainly have to have some education, and I prefer some broad education, and I prefer to have some technical elements to that education, because understanding some of the information that arises in technology data and in technology analysis is strengthened by your ability to understand what's happening in the technology. But certainly, it's sort of tough to have a whole bunch of people specialize in patent law when you can go out and get that sort of expertise. So I'm very comfortable with just sort of basic engineering and basic business analysis to get the broad population started. And then I think other kinds of skill sets will begin to emerge. For example, good CTI and good tech scouting analysts are people who are good at thinking laterally and thinking in new and different ways to extend the normal experience into places that are unusual and possibly far more creative than what they're accustomed to. So an element of creativity and training and education that helps stimulate that, I think, would be a big plus.
Great. Dr. Tao, do you have any sense, do I have to have a doctorate to do this? And let me really reverse that for a second. Is this something that you could see us talking to high schoolers about as a potential path for, meaningful work in the future?
Well, absolutely. I think you don't really have to have a doctor's degree to be able to do effective work, but certainly you do need to have a little bit of a STEM sort of background and to be able to get to, if not really to a really deep level of understanding of the specific technology, but you do need to understand the basic industry, the basic technology trend, understand some of those terminologies, and sort of not afraid of looking at the chart, the flow of the processes, and so on and so forth. So you need to have some, I think, ability to handle the technical side of things. But on the other hand, the career path can be progressive. You can start with a bachelor's degree and starting to add up to that. But I think the most important part of it is more of a practical experience. You are in that industry, you practice, and gradually you will accumulate enough experience to understand the background, the trend of technology, the future landscape of the particular field, and that helps you a lot. And some of the experts we interviewed sort of came from those backgrounds. They can start as a military analyst at their beginning, or start as a CI analyst from a business background, but they gradually sort of catch up on the technology side and understand much more. And I think, again, you can get a doctor's degree to do this at the higher level. I think many in the pharmaceutical industry who does this do have a doctor's degree. And I think for some other industries, you probably don't.
Tom, I can add a comment here, which is a number of the respondents to our survey had PhDs. Others had master's degrees. So it's a very well-educated population overall, in my experience.
We also have some terrific responses coming in via the chat that I want to point folks to. After we get to Cliff Kalb, he's patiently had his hand up. So I'm going to unmute Cliff and see if Cliff can weigh in on this with any questions or comments.
Sure.
So Cliff, you're live.
Can you hear me?
Very well.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I had a question for Brad and Tom regarding the actual conduct of CTI human with regard to the ethics of that process from the scientist and his responsibility to protect intellectual property at his company. Can you talk about that?
I can make a couple of comments. That's a very good point, because oftentimes companies, and in particular scientists and engineers, are not really well trained in how to protect their own intellectual property and their own information, their own company proprietary information. So it's a very important point. And as I mentioned, scientists and engineers, like other groups, like to talk about their work. And they have to be able to understand when you go to a meeting or when you go to a group session, an industry group, you need to understand what sort of things you can say and what sort of things you can't say or shouldn't say. And so I think that's a very important point. And I think for CTI practitioners and scientists and engineers related to them, good training is a real important prerequisite there. So you understand what you have to protect.
Yeah, and I think from the CTI practitioners side, we need to abide by all the ethical guidelines that we typically will use in the CI side. So all the guidelines coming from, let's say, SCIP or SLA apply here, and we need to be clear about who we are, what we are doing, why we're doing this. And we're looking for open data. We're looking for open source data. When it comes to HUMINT, again, you should not misrepresent your identity and your purpose.
Right. Good comment.
So Dr. Tao?
A more pointed question from Jonathan Dunnett along the lines of the career path. So as tools for information identification and analysis become more complex, what impact do you think that will have on the career path?
I'm not sure I get what you're after. So it's the complexity of the area and what impact that'll have on career development?
Yeah, and if Jonathan would like, I can unmute him and he can maybe pose that question more directly. So.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Yes. We got you. Go ahead.
So yeah, the question, Brad, I guess is more in the context of as tools continue to evolve. So you look at some of the coming tide in artificial intelligence as an example.
Right.
So as we're using these types of tools enabled by these enabling technologies, what impact do you think that will have vis-a-vis the overall need for perhaps this specialized education to get people to the outcome or the answer that they're looking for?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good question in the sense that, you know, an education program like the one that Tom leads is such that you can't really cover everything. You need some basic grounding in essential searching processes for data collection and for HUMINT and so forth. But the number of tools that are out there, as you well know, is kind of exploding. And nowadays, a number of the tools themselves are very complex. I find it hard to keep up with what's available, not only in just general searching, you know, large-scale automated searching and screening and organizing information. That's a big job for people in our business. And there are now tools that help you do that. But it takes experience and practice to work with those and to learn about them and to keep up to date. So I think a little basic education in the fundamentals of doing those operations, search operations and analytical operations, but ultimately practical experience is going to be the way to help yourself most, I think.
And I think probably the other way to train a good CTI analyst or a CI analyst is train people who already have years of experience working in certain industries and has technology backgrounds. And then we'll help get them into a degree program or certificate program and teach them about analysis, teach them about collection and understanding and analyzing the data. And that way, we probably will have a better chance of developing a more qualified analyst. And I'm helping Georgetown in their applied intelligence program, and that's a master level program, this is where we get people from work, from their possibly have about 5-6 years working experience, and then we get them to learn some of the CI analytical tools that should really help them to be a much better CI analyst or CI manager.
So, Dr. Tao, you've been developing folks that are entering into this particular field. Can you just give us a little bit of a sense of what these students are doing? Where's the entry point that they're going into? What kinds of companies are they? Are they being hired by? What's been your experience? Developing these folks and in terms of their starting points coming out of your programs.
Well, at the undergraduate level, what we are teaching them is really about analysis. And we show them a lot of structural methods, and we show them a lot of technology, and we show them some sort of industry and business context. But I have to admit that at the undergraduate level, they really don't have the technical or industry experience to really understand what exactly do they want to go or want to do, or what they can do. But in terms of where they will go after graduation, I would say over 40% of them actually go to consulting industry. Deloitte, Accenture, and the sort are the biggest hires of our graduates. So they go to consulting, sort of general consulting field. And some go to industry. And some go to agencies, but by and large, I think consulting industry is the biggest hire.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Fascinating. On that note, I wanted to we're at the 15-minute or so mark to the end of our time, so I wanted to just share some of the resources that we've recommended to people on the next slide here. So Dr. Ashton had mentioned that, and such on the next slide. There we go. Right. So Dr. Brad Ashton mentioned his book. For those of you who may not have seen this, I know Dr. Tao's actually used this, as have I, in courses that we've taught on keeping abreast of science and technology. This was actually written back, it was published in '96. Is that right, Brad? Do I have that date?
Yeah, I think it was actually '97, but you got the time frame right.
Real good. But strangely, despite its relative age here, it still has a lot of fundamental kind of concepts that are timeless and have not gone out of style by stretch. There are some journals. I've got the article there in the middle is from something called the International Journal of Technology, Intelligence, and Planning, otherwise known as IJTIP, for those of you who are looking for articles in CTI or open innovation in the related fields. That's a great journal to look at. And also Skip, back through its Competitive Intelligence Foundation in the mid-2000s, published this book that you'll see here in blue, which is the Competitive Technical Intelligence book. You'll notice also edited by Brad and with our dearly departed colleague Monty Hohoff back in the middle part of the last decade. It was published, I think this one was 2009. I hope I got that one right.
You're right, Craig. You got it.
I finally got one right. So I'm suffering old timers, needless to say. But these are three great resources. Any other resources, kind of published ones that Cynthia, Brad, Tom, that you would recommend that might be of use or value to those of us who are listening, or maybe that need to share with their colleagues in their companies about really getting up to speed quickly on on CTI related areas?
One book I would recommend is done by Alan Potter, and his book is called Technology Mining. And it's really using the data mining tools to really go through patterns, go through literatures, and to identify the technology landscape. And that's a very well-written book. And also it really comes with his software called Vantage Point. And by the way, it's not that expensive for individual users. So that will be a great source for any CTI practitioners.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I would also suggest that even just a general search online, using CTI, your technology intelligence or technology scouting as a keyword or part of a keyword, you'll come up with an awful lot of literature I've run across a number of articles that are relevant in industry-oriented magazines, trade publications. So, I mean, there's a lot of material out there publicly available and free.
And I'll add that from a literature standpoint, let's break it down into the specific facets of expertise of CTI, because it is so vast. And when we do this, I'll just provide an example with patent searching. If you just look at just patent and trademark searching alone, there are specific specialists who have blogs. And so that's a fantastic way of keeping up, because they're your eyes and ears. And so in a sense, you're going to these folks who are really at the center of these various facets of CTI, so that you can get the best coverage you can in terms of what is happening, new technologies, new approaches. So that would, I think, be probably a key recommendation I can provide.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I can add to that, Cynthia. I want to make the point that I've done patent analysis for a long time, but I want to point out that patent data, even though it seems uniquely linked to technology and CTI, patent analysis is a very good resource for general CI. I mean, understanding potential competitors, new competitors, just looking at patents and what's out there won't necessarily tell you what people are doing, but it can tell you what they're positioned to do in the future. And that's an important perspective. I
love that you mentioned this, Brad, because I think many of us have seen in the news that Amazon's patent filing on the Echo. I can't say the word because it'll trigger mine, but for that technology, we get a nice peek at what might be to come, and that has been in the news over the past few days. Right. So that's an excellent example of that. So thank you.
Good, thank you.
Let me add one more resource question to both Tom and Brad in particular. Can you give us one example of some software or of a solution that you've recently come across that has been impressive to you and you see as having great potential to support the kinds of CTI and open innovation work that you guys are doing and pursuing, or maybe doing with your students?
I came across a software called Patent ID. It's really a software that helps you to go through a large amount of patents almost automatically. And it's sort of an AI application in patent research. I think it greatly reduced the burden on analysts to look through all the patents one by one. It really helps you to go through almost millions of patents in a very fast approach. What you can do is they will give you can input the entire relevant article into it as a starting point, and they will search based on that starting point. And they will give you some initial results, recommendations. Then you can look at these highly relevant recommendations and pick and choose which one is the best. So after several rounds, you really get to a very, very relevant set of patents for you to really conducting research or analysis.
I'll add to that and mention another patent tool that I've used that's very powerful called PatSnap. They have everything right there. They have the patent data, so you don't have to go get that separately and then analyze it with a software tool. They're a little expensive, but it's very, very high quality in terms of graphics and outputs and ability to manipulate the data. But what I think I'll do in general is, let me just mention a few of the tools that came in the survey, Tom, from the respondents. And I don't know all these, by the way. I haven't used them all, but let me just mention a few. One is called Digimind Intelligence, Knowledge 360.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's a Reddit keyword monitor tool. ProPorter 5 Forces, which of course is Porter's 5 Forces tool. There's another tool that's been looked popular called CB Insight.
Yes.
So there are several of those that we can point to as being indicated useful by the respondents. And I can send you a list if you'd like. You just email me afterwards and I'll send you a list.
And so here's the contact information for our esteemed panelists. And I just want to also say that we can continue this conversation in our Twitter account and also our LinkedIn group, and that information is on the next slide. And in the meantime, we'll also continue the discussion on Twitter. So please stay tuned. We are at the CI Fellows on Twitter, and so we'll be posting on Twitter and LinkedIn the date and time for a follow-up tweet chat. So as we think a bit more deeply about the subject, many of us will be able to share more tools and suggestions and questions and so forth, and our panels will be ready to answer that. I also want to mention too that our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, June 25th, and it's going to feature Ellen Naylor and August Jackson, and they'll be talking about win-loss analysis, and so it'll be a fantastic discussion between the two of them, and so stay tuned for the registration for that as well. One final item that I want to mention is that the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows has our call for nominations for new fellows for 2019. And so for criteria, instructions, and the nomination form, which is online, please visit this URL here, and I'll spare you from my reading it. And I do want to mention that we are also on social media, and so please do stay up on our news and events. Excuse me. Please look at the Twitter handle there below. That's where you can find us. And also on LinkedIn, we have the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows group. So, and we don't have to wait for us to post anything, any of the recordings, to start a conversation. So just hop on either of those, and then you can certainly pick up on this conversation from today and elsewhere. And I'm just going to turn it back over to Craig, Tom, and Brad to see if you all have any final thoughts.
So yeah, I'd ask you both, if you wouldn't mind, just the 20 million, or maybe it's actually billion-dollar question. Is the future bright for those of us who want to continue to do this kind of work in the next decade? Is it going to be brighter or maybe dimmer than it has been this one?
Well, as I always tell my students, CI and CTI are badly needed in the industry, and we don't have enough wise decisions in market moves and also in technology moves. So having professional people who can conduct great CI or CTI research and helping the decision makers to come up with a much better understanding of the landscape and showing them the correct path, I think that's critical, and that's not going to be easily replaced by machines or AI program anytime soon.
Yeah, I can support that from my own experience. I think in terms of the future, I think this whole area that we talked about earlier called open innovation is going to continue to grow, which means going outside and seeking what information and opportunities there are outside your own R&D and product development labs. And I think technology scouting is a very key component of that. So I think scouting will grow. And just from the literature I've seen in the last year, that's going to be an area that continues to grow. I think I also have noticed, and you'll undoubtedly see this yourselves, there's been a real growth in very powerful, large-scale online search tools, automated bot searching to crawl the web, pull in information, organize it, and screen it. The future is probably going to bring additional tools that will do automated analysis and organize, kind of like doing the automated summary of an article, so you can then you edit it rather than have to write it yourself. So I think there's going to be more of that kind of tool and support available in terms of analysis and collection support. So in terms of need, I think Tom's right on. Technology is not going away. It's going to continue to grow and explode in people's lives and in businesses, and it's going to be very important for anyone pretty much in the technology-related business to keep track of what's going on, take advantage of what they can, and play smart.
Right. So on that note, it is our intention to continue the study of what's going on next year. Dr. Tao and his students are likely to take the second iteration of this as we learn from a little bit of what we've just talked about over the last hour and try to apply it to kind of get a better sense of not only how it's being defined, practiced, and scoped, but to help us really kind of see where it's going. And, you know, for those of you who have an interest in following this or participating or even contributing, certainly stay in touch with us at the Council of CI Fellows as we continue to build on this effort. So, on that note, I'd really like to thank, in particular, Dr. Brad Ashton, Dr. Tom Tao for joining us today. I also want to thank the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows for being so progressive in promoting this kind of research and inquiry. Cynthia, on that note, I know we're nearing the top of the hour, so I'm going to hand it back to you to finish us off, and thank everybody for participating.
Well, thank you so much for helping to champion this study and leading it on behalf of the fellows. And I want to thank Dr. Tom Tao and his students for picking this up, because as you know, there has been a gap in terms of the investigation since when Brad and others had embarked on it. And so I'm really delighted that we're resurrecting these studies. So because as this spreads globally, I think we're going to need more insights to how this is working so that we can shore up our own practices. So thank you all for getting this started. I look forward to the continued conversations as well as the continued research. So I appreciate it. And I also look forward to the community joining us in that as well, because it's very important that we work with practitioners in this, not only in terms of getting insights from the community for the specific studies, but as you can see here from the chat, there's just a lot of expertise that we can build on and we can share with one another as well. So thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you on in June for our next CI Fellows webinar. And in the meantime, I will see you, online on Twitter, as well as in our LinkedIn group, and our names are below. So we will end our broadcast for today, and we'll continue the conversation online. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.